A reading from Point of Betrayal. As Ari returned from the trip to the garden nursery, she saw Jane's Porsche sitting in front of her house. She pulled into the driveway and Jane traipsed across the lawn. She wore pedal pushers and a smart purple blouse that exposed much of her cleavage. She always looked sexy even when she wasn't trying. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a gold clip. Ari couldn't tell if she was dressed for work or play. It was often that way with her. Whenever she left the house, she looked chic, regardless of whether she was grocery shopping, clubbing, or previewing houses. Ari knew she was the opposite. No one would ever confuse her errand attire of jeans and t-shirts with the power suits she wore for clients. "Hi, honey," Jane called. She offered her a peck on the cheek and carefully avoided the 20-pound bag of manure Ari lifted into the wheelbarrow. "You know," Jane said, "there are people you can hire to do that for you." Her nose crinkled in distaste. "But I like doing it myself," Ari replied. "I feel like I'm one with the earth." Truly the sign of a sick mind. I'm one with the earth as well, just not the dirty part. Ari laughed. "Then I guess you won't stay and help." Jane shook her head. "I'm meeting a date for brunch. I just stopped by to show you this." She handed her a printout of a news article from the Laguna Beach Independent with the headline, "Local Woman's Death Ruled Homicide." Surrounded by the story's text was a headshot of a woman Ari vaguely recognized but couldn't place. She glanced at the caption beneath the photo. Nina Hunter. Nina was Jane's first love and one of the few women who'd ever turned her down. "Oh, Jane, I'm so sorry." I'm okay, I think. We really weren't that close anymore, just Facebook buddies. But I can't believe she's gone. Who would kill such a nice person?" Ari skimmed the article, which provided few facts about the murder. She quickly learned that Nina was a social worker at an elementary school in Laguna Beach. Teachers, parents, and the administration sung her praises for her dedication to children and families. Initially, the police thought she'd accidentally fallen over a railing at a scenic spot, but for a reason that was not disclosed, they had changed their minds. "How could someone so admired be murdered?" Jane asked. Ari shook her head. "There's obviously more to her life than what you know from Facebook. It says the prime suspect is Sam Garrettson, the former boyfriend, whose father is a city councilman." "They'd broken up recently," Jane said, "but Sam swore to me that he didn't have anything to do with it. He's terribly distraught. He still loved her." Ari raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know all this?" Jane took a deep breath as if she were preparing for a speech. "Don't say no." "Jane, what's going on? You spoke with Sam?" "He called me. He friended me a few months ago when we both commented on one of Nina's posts. And then he poked me." Ari nodded, well aware of the Facebook lingo. As a real estate agent, she'd learned to navigate Twitter and Facebook in order to survive with the under-30 crowd. But Jane was the queen of social networking. She boasted 4,000 Facebook friends and nearly as many followers on Twitter. And I'd have that many too, Ari thought, if I was willing to discuss my sexual activities in 140 characters. "So what am I not supposed to say no about?" she asked as Jane followed her into the backyard. When Jane didn't answer right away, she dropped the wheelbarrow and faced her. "What did you do?" Gazing down at the manure in the wheelbarrow, Jane pulled a tissue from her purse and wiped the smudges from the face of the bag. "It's just so dirty." "Honey, focus. Why are you here?" She set the tissue in the wheelbarrow and fished 2 airline tickets from her purse. "I think we should take a little vacation." "A vacation? Now? I just moved in." "Yeah, but you need a little time away. You never really took a break after everything that happened. And the last time you took a vacation was at least 5 years ago." "That's not true," she argued. "Molly and I went away on long weekends a few times." "That doesn't count. It's not a vacation if you don't cross state lines. That's a fake vacation that people call a staycation. That's BS. I'm proposing that we go out of town, but in deference to your fragile state, I promise we won't go too far." "Like Laguna Beach?" "Oh, that's a great idea. Let's do that." Ari narrowed her eyes and resumed her wheelbarrowing. "I need to stay here and work. I've just started planting." God, honey, you make it sound like you're a farmer and the crops will die if you don't make the harvest. You can plant any time. I really could use your help with Sam. You could put all of those great former cop instincts to work. The family wants someone else to look into the case, somebody who isn't local and won't arouse suspicion. Sam's dad, Steve, has to keep a low profile. This could hurt his chances for a political appointment with the governor. It would mean a lot to me, and I know you don't have any clients to woo right now. Don't remind me, Ari hissed. She dropped the bag into an empty flower bed and ripped it open. If Jane insisted on having a conversation with her, she'd have to endure the dirt. It sounds like Sam needs a private detective. You should ask Biz, not me. I thought about that, and I'm guessing that if I invited her, she'd be happy to accompany us to California. Why would she do that? She's got a lot of clients who need her. Jane snorted. Honey, if we called her right now, she'd run over her own mother in that cute little Mustang if it meant she'd get here faster. She'd do anything to be close to you. Besides, I thought she was the reason you broke up with Molly. Ari winced, but fortunately Jane couldn't see the tears in her eyes. As she spread the manure with the rake, her mind wandered back to last Valentine's Day and the look on Molly's face when she'd found Ari lying in Biz's arms. I'm sorry I mentioned her, Jane said quietly. Have you heard anything lately? Ari whispered. Despite Jane's strong ties to the lesbian community, she hadn't been able to learn of Molly's whereabouts for the last 9 months. It was as if she dropped off the face of the earth. Actually, I heard she went into a facility after she recovered from the gunshot, and now she's out. What's she doing? I think she's working for her dad. Nelson Plumbing was the family business, but Ari couldn't imagine Molly would be happy repairing toilets or installing sinks. Her life was police work, and she'd been an amazing detective until she'd investigated the death of an informant and inadvertently stumbled into the crosshairs of a mafioso with ties to the police department. She'd been forced to resign, and Ari's father had essentially taken her place in the department and taken over her office. Her career was over. I'm glad she got help. Ari dropped her rake and stared at Jane. Until she left, Ari couldn't enjoy her gardening. It was a solitary experience, as was most everything in her life now, and she relished being away from people, a fact her shrink found disconcerting. I don't want to go to Laguna, she said. I'll be happy to call Biz if you want. She can probably help Sam in some way. Jane rubbed her arms, and Ari imagined she was removing imaginary dirt that clung to her $200 blouse. She hated the outdoors, and Ari knew she was at her personal tipping point. Okay, never mind, she said, defeated. I might call her if Sam wants me to. She started up the brick path and added, I'm using your bathroom before I go. Ari smiled slightly. She was glad Molly was okay. Her dozen emails had been met with some harsh words, and she'd given up. She'd worried Molly might commit suicide over everything that had happened. Ari was certain Molly's brother Brian had saved her. Ari'd called him the day after Molly had resigned, begging his forgiveness, which he gave, and he promised to help Molly through what was undoubtedly the worst part of her life. For old time's sake, Ari had insisted Brian be hired to do the plumbing work on her new house, but she was careful to be conveniently absent whenever he was on the job. She hoped he'd eventually call again, but it hadn't happened. She imagined Molly had forbidden him from keeping in touch, and she understood why. Ari, sweetie, you need to come inside now, Jane shouted from the back door. She dropped the rake and wiped her feet on the mat before stepping across the threshold and into a puddle. Water was everywhere. Jane held up her red manila blahniks with 2 bright pink lacquered fingernails and pointed to the water dripping from their toes. I'm not happy.